everybody. Hi again, it's Tim from Seagate Wines, and today we are going to be doing another focus on a varietal. This one is probably our favorite, and definitely, if not the favorite, it's in the top 2 or 3 for sure. But it's something that we specialize in here at Seagate, and we have gone out of our way to make sure that people are starting to learn about this grape. It's incredibly versatile, really unique in the way that it can be made into incredibly different styles, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But today we're going to talk about Gruner Veltliner. All right, it's the name obviously is in German. But it is a white wine grape that is unique specifically to a certain area. They do have it in multiple places around the world now, but really its biggest home is Austria. Until 1982, Austria was kind of an unknown wine region where they started to they were making bulk wine and simple wines, table wines, very easygoing, not really anything to write home about. And then in 1982, there was a huge scandal where it was thought that people were putting basically antifreeze into the bottles in order to stretch the bottle. But what it was there was a DNA test that was done, and it was actually not antifreeze. It was a naturally occurring issue that had happened, but it had ruined the Austrian wine reputation for a long time. So they started putting in stricter regulations and really focusing on quality. And from that, you now have one of the greatest white wine producing regions in the world, if not the best white wine producing region in the world. I mean, obviously there'll be arguments about that with Burgundy, but I'll get to that in a second. So really the core of Gruner right now, obviously Austria being the largest, Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia, Czech Republic. Those are all places where Gruner is grown. It's also grown in northern Italy, but under a different name, just Veltliner. It's you can find it in a lot of other different places under pseudonyms and synonyms, but for the most part, the best ones you're going to find are going to be in Austria. In 2008, Gruner Veltliner plantations in Austria was just over 17,000 hectares. It's much more than that now, but that was more than 32.6% of all vineyards planted in the country. So that's how important Gruner Veltliner is to Austria and its wine culture. Almost all of it is being grown in the northeastern part of the country. And if you've watched our introduction to Austria video, you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you haven't, go back and check that video out before we start coming into this one, and then you'll get a little bit better understanding of all the places that I'm talking about when I reference them in this video. Okay, so let's talk about the best places that they have right now. Obviously it is always opinion based, but as far as most of the big critics will tell you, the best Gruner Veltliner being produced in Austria right now would be in Wachau, the Kremstal, Kamptal, and Wagram. Those are by far the 4 biggest producers, and I think the best in terms of quality, consistent quality. Those 4 regions probably are going to make up about 50 to 60% of the total growth of Gruner Veltliner in the nation. And it almost always is grown side by side with Riesling. So most of those places, they do tend to coexist, Gruner Veltliner and Riesling together. Outside of Austria, it is the second most widely grown grape in the Czech Republic. It's also been moved now into the US, and you can find a lot of Gruner Veltliner vineyards in places that are kind of strange, places like Massachusetts and Maryland, the North Fork of Long Island. Obviously Finger Lakes being a good wine region, but Gruner being an interesting new addition to that. Pennsylvania, in Clarksburg, and then into the California stuff, San Ynez Valley, Clarksburg, Monterey, and then also into Australia and the Okanagan Valley in Canada. It's starting to make its way around the world because of its popularity as it's growing. The reputation of this wine, it tends to be a particularly good food-friendly wine, and it happens, we started to see it in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it started to pop up everywhere on wine lists. And at the time, we were living in Canada at the time, and we started seeing it even there. So obviously around Europe and in the United States, where a lot of these things start to happen, it was definitely happening in those places. If you take a quick snapshot of some of the best restaurants in America, you will definitely find large selections of Gruner Veltliner in their wine lists, especially if you look at a place like 11 Madison Park or Le Bernardin, the two of the top 50 restaurants in the world. Le Bernardin specifically, if you look at that wine list, there is pages and pages and pages and pages of Gruner Veltliners on their wine list. It's no coincidence that their sommelier, Aldo Sohm, is actually an Austrian as well. But he's also been named the best sommelier on earth multiple times, so I trust his judgment. The actual grape itself, Gruner Veltliner, it goes back well into the Roman times. Its name was derived from Veltlin, which was being grown in northern Italy. And now it's still known as Veltliner, just Veltliner in northern Italy. The grape was actually likely indigenous to the Austrian area. Back then it would be, Hungary, I guess, Hungarian Austro Empire. But its continuation of growth and development has really pushed it to become a very popular grape in modern circles. And a lot of that had to do with a wine tasting that was organized in 2002 by Jancis Robinson and Tim Atkin. And those who know who they are, Jancis Robinson has, she's literally written the book on wine. She's a British wine critic, and Tim Atkin also was a big writer contributor for Wine Spectator, and now does his own thing. In 2002, they held a blind tasting with a lot of the best tasters in the world, and the Schmarek style wines, the very high level wines from the Macau, Camptal, and Wagram areas were selected. They took the selection of the best ones and they put them up against Grand Cru wines from Burgundy, and they won. So you do have to take this very seriously if you're into white wines. If you're really into things like those fine Chardonnays from Burgundy, then you really need to start thinking about taking a good look at Austria. If we look at its pedigree, basically we know that it is a crossing between the Savagnin grape, or the Traminer grape, as what is known as the basic parent of almost all wine grapes, and then an obscure Austrian grapevine from the village of St. Georgen. And that grapevine has now gone back. We've checked; it's been checked, through DNA sampling, and it is it's called St. Georgener Rebe. And it is the parent variety to Gruner Veltliner. Now, Gruner Veltliner is also either a grandchild or half sibling, depending on how you look at the family tree, to Pinot Noir, which, we still don't really know what the relationship is, because it hasn't been DNA profiled that closely to find out the difference between Pinot Noir and Savarin, which is the parent and which is the offspring. So that's still under some speculation. So growing Gruner Veltliner, for the most part, it can grow in a lot of different soils, but the reason why it does so incredibly well in Austria is a soil type that they like to refer to as loess, Loess. And loess is basically, it's kind of like these Dead Sea beds. So a lot of that area in, very, very prehistoric times would have been ancient seas. And as the waters receded, they left huge amounts of fossilized materials, especially things like oyster shells and these huge oyster beds. And they have a lot of this is documented, where the massive oyster beds in some of these regions, specifically Kamtal. You have huge beds of these nutrient-rich, calcium-rich oyster beds that are really great for this specific grapevine. They do incredibly well in those low regions, but the best of these wines are also grown in some of the poorest conditions. On the side of the mountains in the Wachau, these super steep slopes, and again, if you go back to our Austrian video, learning about Austrian wine, go back to that video and you can see some of those pictures, and I'll put some up again here. How steep these slopes are, very slate, mineral, stone, grounds where the roots have to go incredibly deep in order to find any water or nutrients that they need in order to survive, which means they struggle, which means you get better quality fruit. So the thing about this vine is, depending on where it's grown, it can be incredibly fruitful and high yielding, but usually the quality in high yield in a high yielding environment is usually less. But that's why before the scandal of 1982, it was such a big bulk wine, because they were making enormous amounts of it. It's also very susceptible to hazards like powdery mildews and an infestation from a species of rust mites that feed on the grape leaves, which turn the grape leaves all brown. While Gruner Veltliner can grow in all kinds of soil, newer vineyards are experimenting with different vine training systems. So it's not just the soil that's giving you good results, it's the way that it is actually grown. So in Austria, you're gonna find that these vines grow a lot taller than a lot of places around the world. These are, they call it high culture. And they're actually really quite tall. So 4.5 feet tall, 1.3 meters is just the trunk before it starts to actually bud out. And then they reduce the vine density by spacing those in rows that are more than 11.5 feet wide, which is really unheard of for vineyards. They try to keep them as close as possible without sacrificing nutrient value to the vines. They keep them as close as possible so that they can increase their yield and then increase their productivity. So let's talk about the regions. As we did before in our Austria series, there are quite a few different regions in that northeastern part of Austria. But let's talk about the Gruner itself, where it's authorized in 5 DOs, or in Austria, the DACs, Districtus Austriae Controllatus, and obviously in Latin. One of the interesting ones is the Weinviertel. So in Weinviertel, Gruner Veltliner is the only grape allowed to be grown. They do not do any other wines except for Gruner Veltliner and still be DO regulated. That's really interesting. So they basically eliminated every other grape except for this one. And then there's a lot of the other places, as we were talking about earlier, where it's grown in conjunction with Riesling in the same vineyards. In Leiterberg, it can actually be blended with Pinot Blanc, Chardonnay, Neuburger, Triesenthal. So you can actually put all these things together into one single wine and still call it a Gruner Veltliner. Along the Danube River, there's a lot of warm air currents that come up from the Pannonian Basin to the east, and then it blows westward, and it keeps the vines really warm. So this area tends to produce really full-bodied wines compared to some of the other areas that produce a little more acid and a little bit more minerality. You'll get a much more full-bodied wines, and this is why in the Wachau you'll find they have the multiple grading system that we've talked about in our previous video, between Steenfeder, Federspiel, and Schmaragd. And the Schmaragd wines are wines that you can, save 10, 15, even 20 years, and then go back at them again later. These are the wines that we're putting up against, those white Burgundies, the classic Grand Cru white Burgundies, and they are actually winning. They do make in Austria, they do make sweet versions of this under the German system. So they do have an Auslese and a Trockenbeer Auslese style Gruner Veltliner being grown in certain areas near Lake Neusiedl on the border with Hungary. They have 1,272 hectares of Gruner planted there, and 882 hectares planted in Neusiedlersee. It's impossible for me to know these words. They call it the hill country, on the west side, and that's where they're making a lot of these sweet style Gruner Veltliners. Krems is, that region tends to be where some of the oldest vines of Gruner Veltliner are, and it's thought that that would be the place where it was first mass produced and grown in vineyard form. And a lot of those old vines are still being used, and they're over 150 years old, which is really remarkable for a white wine grape. Again, it's being planted all over, that part of Europe, Trentino, Alto Adige, Südtirol. That's all the main parts of northern Italy. Germany. It's being done obviously in Hungary, Bulgaria. So it's definitely all through that whole region. Let's talk about some of the styles. So Gruner Veltliner, it's produced in various styles, from simple jug wine. Basically, we have one produced by our good friend Franz Leth it's literally called Fresh and Easy. That is what it is. So that kind of stuff is really amazing to get your hands on if you're going to drink it right away. Right? That's your everyday go-to, simple, fresh, really nice, great wine for that. But then it can start to develop tertiary aromas with age, and then the grape will show signs of white pepper, or as they call it in Austria, Pfefferl. Lentils, celery, some really interesting vegetal notes, citrus notes. The more full body examples, they tend to go to more of a honey kind of aroma and flavors to them. Gruner is usually produced really, really dry with spicy, peppery notes, and it can be really full bodied. And with age, it'll take on a lot of the same aromas and flavors of white Burgundy. So let's have a quick look at some of these. So in your main guys, that's here. See, these are probably two of the greatest white wine producers in the world. This is Emmerich Knoll and FX Pichler on the other side. Both of these wines are Federspiel wines, so you're in that middle class in the Wachau. So they're going to be light, they're going to be fresh, they're going to be quite refreshing and a good acidity, not as mineral driven as some places. The Leubner vineyards are the ones right along the Danube River, so it's more of a flat soil with a rounded rocky ground. And then this one is from Klostersatz, and Klostersatz is a little bit more hill terrain. You will find a little bit more minerality, and I find that FX Pichler wines are far more aggressive anyway in their winemaking style, which is why critics love them so much, is because they're very, very razor focused on specific places. And that's one of the cool things about FX Pichler that I love so much. So these are wines out of the Wachau region. This is also from the Wachau region, also from Emmerich Knoll, but this is a Schmaragd wine. So this is going to be, you'll be able to drink this wine in 10 years time and not have any fears of it not being as good as it was before. In fact, it'll be better. So that's the difference between really the Federspiel wines and the Schmaragd wines, is the Schmierach wines are better later. The Federspiel wines, and especially the Steenfeder wines, are better younger. So something to look into. And then let's look at these guys. So one of the oldest wineries in Austria is Schloss Gobelsberg, and Schloss Gobelsberg is in Kamptal, and it's been in constant production since about 1140. Not AM, I mean like the date, 1140, so the 12th century. And they make so many different versions, but one thing I really wanted to point out is the bottle style. So young, fresh, easygoing wines you're going to find in this classic Austrian Riesling style bottle. I guess it's a German Riesling style bottle, but all the Austrian fresh and light Gruners you're going to find in a bottle like this pretty much. Wines with a little bit more structure, more ageability, that have maybe some time in that neutral oak that we've talked about in our Austrian video, will be more in the Burgundian style bottle. It's just kind of gives you a mental definition as to what that wine capability actually is. The Burgundian style bottles, you treat them like a Burgundy. The Riesling style bottles, treat them like a Riesling. All right, so it's very simple. Fresh, drink now, drink later. Very, very simple. Schloss Gobelsberg, if you haven't tried it, these are amazing. Reed Steinsets in that Burgundian style. This isn't the entry point to getting into those wines. This wine just got 92 points from Robert Parker and is an incredible value on our website. If you're interested, check that out. Let's do a couple more here. So again, just reinforcing that this is from the Wagram region. Our good friend Bernard Ecker. Again, Riesling style bottle, drink it now. The Burgundian style bottle, drink it later. Ried Mordfall, really concentrated, huge wine. And then the Steinberg, again, such a great value. This is such a high quality wine that you can drink right now, and you will never be disappointed in this wine, but at a price that you can drink it every day. Right? Amazing stuff. And then our favorite, mostly for sentimental reasons, but also because it's an amazing wine. This is ours. So this was developed by us and a fifth generation winemaker named Franz Bayer in Wagram. And we met Franz through a friend of a friend, and we went to their house for dinner and hung out and tried a lot of their wines. And we decided that we wanted to have a wine, well, actually 3 wines that he's made for us that were specific to hot climate and would work incredibly well in hot climate. And the Gruner works so well in this climate because it's just such a unique flavor profile. It just balances out warmth and heat, and it's so good with food that way. This wine is a 2016 vintage, and it's still absolutely incredible. So if you haven't tried our Seagate Gruner Veltliner, you definitely want to try that. That wine is pretty much always available by the glass at Flying Fish Gastro Bar, at least when we're not completely under lockdown and the restaurant is open. But yeah, so really important to remember the simple things. Bottle style will reflect its freshness level and when to drink it. And just remember to, think about if you're pairing, think about what food you want to put it with. The big Burgundian style, things that are a little bit richer, heavy in butter. Those wines will go very well with that. Obviously, the more acidic and fresher wines go with, fresher foods, just to try and keep it incredibly simple. At the end of the day, drink what you like and put it with things you like, and you're always going to be happy. So I hope that you guys have learned a little bit of something about our favorite grape, Gruner Veltliner. And if you have any questions or anything else you'd like to ask us, be sure to drop us a message and let us know. If you have anything that you haven't seen yet in the video series that you want to learn about, also let us know that too, and we'll make a video trying to get to that point completely so that you get all your questions answered. Looks like we're going to be in lockdown for a while, so nothing better to do but learn more about wine. So I hope you guys are having fun doing this with us, and we'll see you again next time. Cheers.